The glass slipped slightly in my fingers when my mother said it. Not shouted, not whispered. Said clearly, calmly, like she'd practiced it in the mirror 100 times before tonight. This is what happens when one person decides to tear a family apart. Every fork froze mid-air. Every chair stilled. And every single face at that dinner table turned toward me like I'd just confessed to murder. My pulse roared in my ears as I realized something horrible all at once. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a performance. A carefully staged show where I was the villain, and everyone else was the shocked audience. My Aunt Patricia's eyes widened. My cousins Marcus and Olivia exchanged confused glances. Even my younger brother Tyler looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat like he wanted to disappear into the floorboards. But Mum. She sat there with her hands folded on the tablecloth, wearing that expression I knew so well. The martyred mother. The wounded woman who'd tried so hard to keep her family together, only to be betrayed by her ungrateful daughter. What the hell just happened to me? She didn't look at me when she continued. She looked at Aunt Patricia. At Marcus and Olivia. At Tyler, who was studying his plate like it held the answers to the universe. She's been spreading things, Mum went on gently, her voice dripping with manufactured sadness. Twisting conversations. Turning people against each other. I've tried to keep the peace, but I can only do so much. Her hand rested on the table like a martyr's offering, fingers splayed just so. I recognized that gesture. She'd used it before, countless times, whenever she needed sympathy. I opened my mouth to speak. Nothing came out. My throat felt tight like someone had wrapped their hands around it and squeezed. Because I understood now. If I spoke too fast, I'd look defensive, guilty. Exactly what she wanted. And she knew it. The silence stretched between us like a living thing. Aunt Patricia cleared her throat softly. Marcus glanced at me, then away. Nobody interrupted Mum. They never did. The room felt smaller suddenly. Utter. The chandelier above us seemed too bright, casting harsh shadows across everyone's faces. I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, each second stretching into eternity. My mother finally looked at me then. Her eyes glassy with what anyone else would call pain. But I'd seen this look before. I knew what it really was. Rehearsed. Calculated. Perfect. I don't know why you hate me so much, she said softly, her voice breaking just enough to sound genuine. And in that moment, the truth crystallized with terrifying clarity. My mum blamed me for the family fallout she created. Every argument, every cold shoulder, every whispered conversation that ended when I entered the room. She'd orchestrated all of it, then pointed the finger at me. Perfect crime. The invisible manipulation. I was the scapegoat for her own destruction. And she'd convinced everyone to believe it. My name is Madeline. I'm 28 years old. And I didn't come to that dinner to defend myself. I came because I was tired of running from a story that had been written about me instead of by me. What no one at that table knew, what my mother couldn't possibly imagine, was that I'd already stopped trying to explain myself. Months ago. I'd stopped defending, stopped correcting, stopped fighting against the tide of lies she'd been spreading. Instead, I'd started doing something else. Something she never saw coming. I'd started collecting evidence. Not out of revenge. Not because I wanted to hurt her. But because I needed proof that I wasn't crazy. That the things I remembered actually happened. That the words she said in private were real, even if she denied them in public. I needed to know I wasn't the problem. And now, sitting at this dinner table with everyone staring at me like I was broken, I finally had what I needed. It wasn't always explosive between us. The destruction started quietly, like rust forming on metal you can't see until it's too late. Comment here. Sigh there. Madeline's just sensitive. You know how she exaggerates things. She's always been dramatic. Small enough to ignore. Sharp enough to sting. Little cuts that added up over years until I was bleeding from 1,000 invisible wounds. And every time I tried to correct the record, every time I said, "That's not what happened," or "I never said that," my mum would tilt her head and give me that look. The one that said I was being difficult again. "Why are you making this into a thing, Maddie?" she'd ask, using the childhood nickname that suddenly felt like a weapon. So eventually I stopped making it into a thing. I stopped correcting her. I stopped defending myself. I learned to be quiet. My brother Tyler never noticed the difference. He didn't have to. In our family, Tyler was the golden child. The one who could do no wrong. When he spoke, people listened with genuine interest. When I spoke, people waited for Mum's reaction first, like she was some kind of translator for my thoughts. She'd nod approvingly when Tyler talked about his job or his girlfriend or his weekend plans. She'd smile and engage and ask follow-up questions. But when I talked, her face would shift. Subtle frown. A slight tightening around her eyes. Nothing overt. Nothing you could point to and say, "There, that's wrong." Just enough to train the room. Just enough to signal that whatever I was saying wasn't quite right. Wasn't quite trustworthy. And everyone picked up on it whether they realized it or not. It became background music to our family dynamic. Tyler speaks, everyone listens. Madeline speaks, everyone hesitates. The day it really clicked for me was the day I apologized for something I hadn't done. I don't even remember what the accusation was anymore. Something about forgetting to call Aunt Patricia on her birthday, or missing a family event, or saying something that supposedly hurt Mum's feelings. It was easier to just say sorry than to fight. So I did. "I'm sorry," I told her, feeling empty inside. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I watched my mum accept the apology graciously. Her face softening into forgiveness. She even hugged me, patting my back like I was a child who'd finally learned her lesson. That's when I understood. Truth didn't matter here. Facts didn't matter. What actually happened was irrelevant. Control was all that mattered. And she had it. She controlled the narrative, controlled how people saw me, controlled every relationship I had within our family. As long as I kept apologizing for things I didn't do, the peace continued. So I went quiet. Not obviously. I still showed up to family dinners. I still sent birthday cards and Christmas presents. I still answered the phone when Mum called. But inside I changed. I stopped trying to convince anyone of my version of events. I stopped defending myself in group chats or at family gatherings. I stopped arguing when Mum rewrote history right in front of everyone. I didn't confront her. I didn't warn anyone what I was starting to see. I didn't make dramatic announcements about going no contact or setting boundaries. I just observed. I watched the patterns. I paid attention to what she said and when she said it and to whom. And I started saving things. Screenshots of text messages. Voice recordings when she called me. Notes about conversations while they were still fresh in my memory. Not because I had a plan. Just because I needed proof. For myself. "I never said that," Tyler spoke up suddenly. "I asked you why Madeline seemed distant lately, and you said she was dealing with personal stuff. You never said." "Because I was protecting both of you," Mum cut in, but her voice messages don't lie. That's what I learned. People can misremember conversations. They can convince themselves they said something differently than they did. Memory is fuzzy and unreliable. But texts are permanent. Voice notes are permanent. Digital evidence doesn't forget. "Don't mention this to Madeline," she texted Aunt Patricia once. "She'll just make it dramatic and ruin everything. Just let me handle her," she told my cousin Olivia in a voice note. "She's going through something and I don't want to upset her more. Tyler's always been the easier one," she confided to someone. "Maddie's just complicated." Casual little comments sent when she thought no one would ever connect them. When she thought she was speaking privately to allies, to people who would keep her secrets. I didn't react when I discovered these messages. I didn't confront anyone. I just saved them. Added them to a folder on my phone labeled Family. Archived everything. The more I collected, the clearer the pattern became. Mum told different stories to different people, tailored to get the exact response she wanted from each one. She told Aunt Patricia I was unstable, going through a mental health crisis, too sensitive to handle normal family discussions. She told my cousin Marcus I was jealous, envious of Tyler's success, unable to be happy for other people's achievements. She told Olivia I was resentful, still angry about childhood things that everyone else had moved past, holding grudges for no reason, different reasons for my supposed problems, different explanations for why I was the way I was. But the same villain in every story. Me. I was the common thread, the problem child, the difficult one, the reason there was tension at family gatherings, the reason people had to walk on eggshells. She'd created a version of me that didn't exist, then convinced everyone it was real. Family dinners were always her stage, the place where she performed her role as the patient, loving mother who tried so hard despite having such a difficult daughter. So I waited. For months I waited. I didn't force anything. I didn't create drama. I just watched and collected and prepared. When Mum called to invite me to Sunday dinner at Aunt Patricia's house, I could have said no. Part of me wanted to. The old Madeline would have made an excuse, avoided the confrontation, stayed safely away. But I changed. I was tired of running from a narrative I didn't write. So when she said, "The whole family will be there, sweetie. It would mean so much if you came," I heard what she really meant. She wanted an audience. She wanted witnesses for whatever story she planned to tell next. "I'll be there," I told her. And I meant it. This time I'd be ready. The dinner had started normally enough. Aunt Patricia's famous roast chicken. Tyler talking about his promotion at work. Olivia complaining about her landlord. Marcus showing everyone photos of his new apartment. I'd been quiet, just listening, waiting. And then Mum had started in on me, seemingly out of nowhere, turning the entire dinner into a referendum on my character. "She's been spreading things," Mum was still saying, her voice steady and sad. "Twisting conversations. I've tried to keep the peace, but I can only do so much." The table was silent now except for her voice. Everyone was watching this performance unfold. I took a slow breath, letting the moment stretch. Then I spoke for the first time since she'd started her attack. "Can I ask you something?" My voice was quiet but clear. The question hung in the air. Mum's smile tightened at the edges. "Of course, sweetheart. Which version of the story do you want them to believe?" The room shifted. I felt it like a physical change in pressure. Aunt Patricia set down her fork carefully. Marcus stopped mid-chew. Tyler finally looked up from his plate. My mum laughed lightly, but it sounded forced. "What does that mean, Maddie?" I nodded slowly, like she just confirmed exactly what I knew she would say. "That's what I thought." She blinked at me, and for just a second, I saw confusion flash across her face. This wasn't going according to her script. I was supposed to either defend myself loudly, making myself look guilty, or stay silent, letting her story stand unchallenged. Instead, I was asking questions. Calm questions that didn't make sense to her yet. "Madeline, if you have something to say, just say it," she pressed, trying to regain control. "I brought something," I said quietly, reaching into my bag that sat beside my chair. Mum's eyes flickered. Just for a moment, something like worry crossed her face. "Is that really necessary?" Mum asked, her voice still controlled but with an edge now. "We're having a family dinner." I met her gaze steadily. For the first time in years, I didn't look away first. "You said you wanted honesty. You said I've been spreading things and twisting conversations. I don't think we need to." "You invited me here," I interrupted gently. "You started this conversation in front of everyone. So let's finish it." Aunt Patricia shifted in her seat. "Maybe we should." "No." Mum waved her hand dismissively, but I saw her jaw tighten. "Go on, Madeline. If you need to make your point, make it." That was her mistake. Giving me permission. Probably thinking I had nothing concrete, nothing that could actually challenge her carefully constructed narrative. She thought I'd ramble or get emotional or ultimately prove her point about me being dramatic. She had no idea what was coming. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder. My hands were steady. I'd practiced this moment in my head 100 times, but now that it was here, I felt strangely calm. "This is a text message you sent to Aunt Patricia 3 months ago," I said, then read it aloud. "Don't mention the reunion to Madeline. She'll just make it weird and stir up old problems. Better if she doesn't come." My voice was even. No emotion. No commentary. Just facts. I looked at Aunt Patricia. She'd gone pale. "I didn't know there was a reunion," I continued quietly. "Nobody told me about it. But you told everyone else I was the reason it had to be kept secret." Mum opened her mouth, but nothing came out for a second. Then she recovered. "You're taking that out of context. I was trying to protect you." Someone cleared their throat. Tyler, looking uncomfortable. "This is a voice note you sent to Olivia," I said, tapping my phone. "Can I play it?" I didn't wait for permission. Mum's voice filled the quiet dining room, tinny from my phone speaker but unmistakably hers. "Olivia, I need you to do me a favor. If Maddie asks about the birthday lunch, just tell her it was spontaneous. She gets so hurt when she's not included, but honestly, it's exhausting walking on eggshells around her feelings all the time." Olivia's face flushed red. "That's not what you told me," she said slowly, looking at Mum. "You said Madeline was too busy with work to come. You said she'd told you she couldn't make it." "I did say I was busy," I confirmed. "Because I was. But I was never invited in the first place." Mum's fingers curled into her napkin. "This is ridiculous. You're twisting things." "Am I?" I pulled up another message. Should I keep going? The room had grown colder somehow. Or maybe it was just that everyone was seeing clearly for the first time. I showed them the message where Mum told Marcus I was jealous of Tyler's success. Then the one where she told Tyler I was angry at him for being the favorite child. Had lost its steadiness. "You don't understand the full situation." I pulled up another screenshot. This one was from a group chat I wasn't part of, forwarded to me by a cousin who'd finally gotten tired of the lies. "In this chat, you told everyone I was spreading rumors about Uncle James's business. That I was trying to cause problems in his marriage." Aunt Patricia gasped. "You said that. Madeline would never." "None of it was true," I said quietly. "I barely spoke to Uncle James last year. I didn't spread anything. But you needed a reason to explain why the family was splitting into sides. So you blamed me." The final message was the one that collapsed everything. I'd been saving it, waiting for the right moment. "This is from 2 weeks ago," I said, pulling it up. "A text you sent to Tyler." I read it aloud word for word. "Tyler, I need to tell you something. Madeline's been saying awful things about me to Aunt Patricia. She's trying to turn the family against me because she's always resented our relationship. I don't know what I did to deserve such a hateful daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the grandfather clock seemed to have stopped ticking. Tyler's face had gone white. "Mum, you told me that conversation was private. You said Madeline had come to you crying, trying to apologize for how she'd been acting. You said she was getting help," Tyler continued, his voice rising. "You said she admitted to being the problem." I shook my head. "We haven't had a private conversation in 6 months." Mum's facade finally cracked. "You're twisting things," she snapped, her careful composure shattering. "You're taking private conversations and making them sound worse than they were. That's exactly what I've been talking about." But nobody backed her up this time. Nobody nodded in agreement or rushed to her defense. Aunt Patricia was staring at her sister with something like horror. Marcus looked sick. Olivia had tears in her eyes. Tyler's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. "Which part did I twist?" I asked quietly. "I read your exact words. Your messages. Your voice notes. Context matters," Mum said desperately. "You don't understand the context. Then explain it." I set my phone down on the table. "Tell everyone the context that makes it okay to lie about your daughter to your entire family." She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. For the first time in my life, my mother had no words. "I'm not here to convince anyone of anything," I said, pushing back my chair and standing. I'm not here to make you choose sides or force apologies. I'm just done carrying this. I looked around the table at my family. People I loved. People who'd believed her stories because they had no reason not to. I spent years wondering if I was the problem. If I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too difficult. I apologized for things I didn't do. I changed how I acted, how I spoke, how I showed up. Trying to be the daughter she wanted. The person you all could accept. My voice stayed steady. I'd cried enough tears over this in private. Tonight was just about facts. But I'm done. I'm done defending myself against stories I didn't write. I'm done being the villain in someone else's narrative. Picked up my bag. Maddie, wait. Tyler started. I'm okay, I told him, and I meant it. I really am. I walked toward the door. I'd almost made it to the hallway when my cousin Olivia spoke up, her voice shaking. Why would you lie like that? She asked, but she wasn't talking to me. She was looking at my mother. Mum's face was pale now, stripped of that careful control she'd worn like armor. I didn't, it wasn't. Yes, you did, Olivia said louder now. I heard your voice. I saw the messages. You told me Madeline was making things up. And the whole time you were the one lying. Marcus nodded slowly. You told me she was jealous of Tyler. You made me think she was bitter and spiteful. I avoided her for months because of you. This is why we stopped talking, Aunt Patricia said quietly, realization dawning on her face. 3 years ago, you told me Madeline had said terrible things about my parenting. I confronted her. She had no idea what I was talking about, and I thought she was lying. She looked at me stricken. You weren't lying. I didn't wait for my mother's response. I didn't need to hear her scramble for explanations or watch her try to rebuild the narrative one more time. I'd said what I needed to say. I'd shown what I needed to show. The rest wasn't my responsibility anymore. I walked out of Aunt Patricia's house into the cool evening air. My car was parked at the curb, and I made it there before the tears finally came. Not tears of sadness exactly. More like relief. The kind that comes after holding your breath underwater for too long and finally breaking the surface. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Taylor. Then Olivia. Then Marcus. Then Aunt Patricia. I silenced it and drove home. I'd answer tomorrow or the next day or whenever I felt ready. Tonight was just about breathing. About knowing I'd finally stopped running from the truth. Whatever happened next would happen. But at least now, everyone knew the story she'd been telling wasn't mine. The calls and messages continued for days after that dinner. But they weren't coming to my mother anymore. They were coming to me. Apologies flooded in. Aunt Patricia called crying, saying she was so sorry for believing the lies. Olivia sent a long text explaining how manipulated she'd felt. Marcus asked if we could meet for coffee, just the two of us, so he could hear my side of things properly. Even Tyler, who'd been the golden child his whole life, reached out. I had no idea, he told me when we finally talked. I knew Mom had favorites, but I didn't realize she was actively turning people against you. I'm sorry I didn't see it. Meanwhile, invitations to family events stopped going to Mum. Not because anyone explicitly excluded her, but because nobody wanted to extend them anymore. The group chat that had been active for years went quiet whenever she posted. People stopped calling her for advice or gossip. I heard through Tyler that Mum tried to do damage control. She called people individually, trying to explain, to justify, to rebuild what had crumbled. But the thing about control is that once you lose it, it's almost impossible to get back. Once people see the manipulation clearly, they can't unsee it. All those little comments and subtle digs and twisted stories suddenly made sense in a new way. Aunt Patricia remembered other times Mum had rewritten history. Marcus recalled conversations that hadn't quite added up. Olivia started questioning every story she'd been told. The foundation of lies couldn't support the weight of truth once it was exposed. Mum tried reaching out to me too eventually. Text messages that cycled through anger, guilt-tripping, and finally desperate apologies. Can we talk? I miss you. I never meant to hurt you. You're still my daughter. But I'd learned that some relationships are built on sand, and no amount of wanting them to be solid will change that fundamental truth. I didn't block her. I just didn't respond. 6 months after that dinner, I was different. Not healed. Healing isn't a destination you arrive at and then stay forever, but different in ways that mattered. I didn't replace my mother in the family structure. I didn't take over as the matriarch or try to fill the void she'd left. I didn't punish her or campaign against her or try to turn people further away from her. I simply lived. I went to family gatherings when I was invited. I rebuilt relationships with cousins and aunts and uncles without the weight of her narrative between us. I let Tyler be my brother again without suspicion or distance. And slowly, the family started to heal around the truth instead of around a lie. People ask me sometimes if I forgave her, if I planned to reconcile, if family meant giving her another chance. But I learned something important in those months. Some people don't lose you because you leave them. They lose you because they finally show everyone who they really are. And that, I realized, was the ending she'd feared most all along. The truth doesn't need defenders, just needs witnesses. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop fighting the story someone wrote about you and simply show people who you actually are. Not with explanations, not with arguments, just with evidence, honesty, and the quiet strength to walk away from battles that were never yours to fight in the first place.